asking disabled people what happened. Hey y'all, my name is Jessica Jordan, also known as the Rolling Explorer, and welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm gonna spill the accessibility on what makes the question, what happened, problematic to the disability community, what asking it probably says about you and your own internalized ableism, and what you can say instead. There are 3 things wrong with the question, what happened? Number 1, it insinuates that something bad happened. And for many people with disabilities, that's not the case. For many people with disabilities, it's something that developed over time. Or perhaps it was something that they were born with. Like me, I was born with a very rare congenital disease that has affected me for my entire life and will continue to do so in pretty much the same way for the rest of my life. Nothing dramatic happened, shockingly, considering I am the queen of chaos. But no, it's just who I am. But that said, point 2 is that you also can't just assume that, because some people did acquire their disabilities through very, very painful, horrifying, and traumatic events. And when you ask what happened, you're essentially asking somebody to remember and recall and go back to that traumatic event. You are literally taking them back into that moment. You could be triggering all sorts of emotional and physical responses and not even know it by asking what you might think is a harmless question, but is actually super duper painful, especially if you're not the first person to ask it on that day, which can happen. And then finally, the third reason why what happened is just inherently not a great question to ask a disabled person is because it's super invasive. Regardless of how someone acquired their disability, if it was something that they were born with, if it was something that developed over time, or if it was something that happened through trauma, you are asking somebody a very personal question. And typically, the people asking this question aren't people that are trying to get close to disabled people. They're just people who are encountering us out in our day-to-day lives. Literal strangers on the street. Somebody I've never met before, will probably never see again, is basically asking me for private medical history and for me to trauma dump all over them. No thanks. That's a really rude thing to do. Every time I talk about why someone shouldn't ask the question, what happened, people jump in my comment section and are like, stop being so sensitive. Just answer the question. People are allowed to be curious. Let's talk about what curiosity actually means when it comes to the question, what happened? Because generally speaking, there are 3 things fueling this curiosity. Number 1 is fear. Visible disabilities like my own, mental disabilities, pretty much anything that was different was thought to be witchcraft or evil and a sign of the devil himself throughout history. People thought that because someone was behaving differently or because they looked different meant that that was a sign that evil had entered into a person. Because in some sense, it's like karma. This person is bad, so they have a bad result. This person is evil, so they are literally the visual representation of what it means to be evil. And so they were cast off from society. They were often exiled or killed or left to die. In more modern history, disabled people were castrated, experimented on, and sent to live in really run-down asylums and institutions. Basically, to be kept from the public eye. And this is really recent history. This goes back just a few decades ago. So we have come a long way, and I think it's important I say that. But understanding why there is still fear that is driving that curiosity and why that very much is probably most people's source for this question, even if they're not in tune with that, is something to take note of. Because by asking this question, you're essentially trying to figure out for yourself, I see that this person is different. I see that this person probably has a harder life than I do. How do I avoid having that exact situation happen to me? Even if that doesn't feel like it's your intention, take a closer look inside yourself. Really try to figure out if that actually might be it. It's possible. That's all I'm saying. The second reason someone might ask this question is their ego. Maybe you just want to feel good about yourself, and so hearing how crappy someone else has had it makes you appreciate where you are even more. I really wish I was kidding with this one, but it's true. People do this. This is a thing. People like to feel good about themselves, and I don't fault anyone for that, but doing so at the expense of myself and other members of my community, I don't agree with that. Nope. You need to learn to build up yourself and not rely on somebody else's crappy experience to make you feel better. And the third thing that might be motivating this question for you is a desire for inspiration. In the media, disabled stories are often told through an inspirational lens, meaning that our trauma is divulged and then it shows how we overcome overcome all adversity. And honestly, the disabled lived experience is so much more complicated and nuanced than that. It's not just a 180 experience. There are so many uphill and downhills through the entire process, and everybody has their own experiences, their own journeys, and their own feelings toward their disability, and all of it is valid. But because mainstream media really only includes disabled people when it can do so in an inspirational way, society at large has gotten used to using the disability community as a source of inspiration or motivation. To be like, oh, well, if they're doing that, then I can do this. And when you ask what happened, oftentimes you're not just listening for the tragedy, you're also listening to hear what came afterwards. And also, I'm very much not talking about children asking questions right now. This is adults, because I would say 8 times out of 10, it's an adult who's asking me these questions. Typically, a child would ask their parents, and that is then the parents' responsibility to give an educational and socially responsible answer to their child. If you want to see a video on that, then be sure to hit that subscription button and notification bell, because I will be covering how parents should answer that question to their children in a future video. But for now, let's focus in on what adults could do instead of asking a disabled person what happened. The first one is so simple. You could say and ask nothing. Leave us alone. Don't bother us. That is about as simple as it gets. If you're not approaching every single person you pass on the street with personal questions and expecting thoughtful and extensive responses, then treat us like you would any other human being, because we are just human beings, plain and simple. But if you feel compelled to approach us for whatever reason, do so as you would anybody else. Hello, how are you? My name is, boom. It's not complicated, folks. Now, there are some disabled people that don't mind answering the question, what happened? Their argument is that they'd rather have people fill their curiosity than just stare at them. My perspective is, why can't people do both? Why can't they just keep their own internalized ableism to themselves and control their face and actively turn their eyes away if they notice themselves staring? Because everybody's an adult. Everybody should be responsible for themselves. I don't think that's a lot to expect of adults. I hope you learned something from this video and you understand why asking the question, what happened, isn't really nice and isn't a good way to get to know a disabled person, nor is it a good way to make us feel included in society or seen or heard or respected, and try just treating us like you would anybody else. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and a comment down below, and I'll see you to spill some tea very soon. Bye!